This video is part 1 of Chapter 11, Social, Consumer, and Media Psychology for PSY 120, Careers in Psychology, Neuroscience, and Human Development. This chapter I can actually lend a certain amount of my own expertise to because my training, my doctoral degree, is in social personality psychology, and I've also done some research in the area of media psychology. So what is social psychology? Social psychology is essentially the study of human behavior, emotion, and cognition in a social environment. Social psychologists study how people are influenced by each other, whether you're talking about the real presence of other people or just imagining what other people are thinking. Social psychologists, their work often overlaps with the study of personality. My PhD program, for example, my degree is in social personality psychology, so social/personality. So we often overlap. Another thing to be aware of with social psychology, it's often considered a hybrid, combining some of the sensibilities and topic area interests of sociology and psychology. The difference between sociology and psychology, though, is that sociologists tend to look at the group level of analysis, like the family, the culture, the community, whereas social psychologists still focus on the individual. Social psychologists are heavily involved in research work. I think I mentioned in a previous video that I consider myself to be an experimental social psychologist, primarily because the type of work that I do is either experimental or quasi-experimental in nature. So a lot of that research that's coming out of social psych labs is basic research trying to answer fundamental questions, but there's also tremendous opportunity for doing applied research. So going out into the real world, using science and data to solve real life problems. Consumer psychology is often considered to be a subdiscipline of social psychology, although not all the time. So some consumer psychologists come out of a social psychology tradition. They're trained as researchers, and they focus on the behavior of people as consumers. What kind of things influence them? How can they be persuaded? What kind of choices and decisions do they make? How do they respond emotionally to products and services? Some people, though, come to their consumer psychology careers straight through business, with interest in marketing in particular. Regardless, they're going to get some advanced training in consumer psychology. Consumer psychologists use the research that they do to help organizations and businesses adjust, design, deploy their marketing strategies as well as their patterns of sales. Studying consumer behavior can help make those adjustments to marketing strategies. For instance, what kind of advertising is going to be the most effective for encouraging people to buy product X, whatever that product is, or to invest in a certain long-term solution, whatever it might be. So what consumer psychologists are often doing is comparing the effectiveness of different kinds of techniques that people might use, whether it's in marketing or sales, so that businesses can invest their dollars in the best places for creating good outcomes, which is selling more of their products and services. So you're going to find consumer psychologists in applied settings, but also in academia, where they are primarily basic researchers. But a lot of consumer psychologists are working in business and industry. They may be found working in government as well as nonprofits. Frequently, these are individuals, especially if they have graduate level training, specifically a PhD, they're often involved in consulting, either working in a consulting firm or in private practice. Media psychology is, like consumer psychology, often considered to be an offshoot of social psychology. specifically looking at the way in which humans interact with media. And this includes, all kinds of media. Radio, television are the classics, but then now we have the whole world of the internet and technologies that support it. So media psychology looks at the way in which being engaged with media has impacts on our attitudes, beliefs, values, and ultimately our behaviors. Some media psychologists are going to look at how people use and create media, but they're also interested in how people interact with it. So, for example, I do get on TikTok from time to time, every day. I mostly look at videos of cats and dogs and the occasional goat. But, TikTok knows how old I am, and it probably has access to my Google searches, so it feeds me videos with all kinds of content that's related to my other behaviors. A media psychologist might want to know, how would that predict my choices to buy products? Or how does it shift my attitudes towards certain topics? How does it shape my voting behavior, for example? As I mentioned before, media is a broad concept. It refers to all kinds of ways in which information is shared with people. So you have print, radio, television, internet sources. Media psychologists also, though, really look at how technology continues to keep advancing. So there's a lot of interest right now in AI, and the way in which we interact with it, how it shapes what we do with our time, and how it shapes our work. So to bottom line it, media psychologists study any and all issues related to psychology as it interacts with media. So if you have interest in any of these three areas, social, consumer, and media psychology, what kind of jobs at the bachelor's level might be interesting to you? If you are kind of one of those people, and I have a lot of advisees who are either minors or double majors in business, specifically their interests are in marketing. So what I tend to encourage them to do is, take social psychology, take personality psychology, take your marketing classes, and definitely get an internship working in the market assistant area. This is the same kind of space where, with your bachelor's degree, you could go in on the ground floor and work as a marketing assistant. So the assistant helps the manager, the marketing manager, and the rest of the marketing team do a lot of the administrative, but also some of the creative tasks that are involved in creating a marketing campaign for a product or a service. Some marketing assistants, depending on the skills that they bring into the job, engage in creative activities. They may build content for websites, for social media, and their work, it may cross some boundaries into some of the BA level positions we'll explore here in the next few slides. Some marketing assistants are actually in charge of dealing with social media accounts, posting content, engaging with followers, and so on. Some are going to be able to be involved in brainstorming, putting together graphics, putting together budgets, and so on. And that just really depends on the workplace and what kind of responsibilities they give people when they come into those ground level, entry level marketing jobs. Having a psychology major, particularly having taken courses in social and personality psychology and consumer psychology, if it's available, can make you an asset. Now, these entry-level jobs, these BA level positions, as of 2023, the median salary was about $47,000. Similarly, entry-level positions in advertising often are in the account management space or in the media department, where you have someone who can be a clerk, which is a really old-fashioned term for being an assistant, media coordinator, media planner, media buyer. They're going to, you can find entry-level positions in these advertising spaces to do those kinds of jobs. Advertising clerks assist advertising managers in working new client accounts. So they may look to identify new clients, solicit new clients, kind of get the initial statements about what the clients need, communicate with them about who's working on their accounts, and so on. Assistant media planners are going to work with the media planner to really think about what kind of public messaging is being put out, what kind of information is preferred, what kind of demographics respond to different kinds of media. They may also, evaluate content in various media outlets to determine where they could best position their advertising dollars. Media buyers work with media planners. They use the research that the media planners do to decide how to maximize their advertising budget. So, you're buying ad space is why it's called media buyers. You're buying ads space on, whether it's on social media or every time I go to the grocery store, the veterinary practice that I take my dogs to, they have ads in the carts. So somebody has to decide, a media buyer has to decide, where's the best place to put these ads. Something that students often don't think of is sales positions. Real estate is an example here of people who really need to be good at understanding human social behavior and understanding persuasion and persuasion tactics. Real estate agents, their job is to sell property. So they work to bring buyers and sellers together. They work to identify properties, to market those properties, to bring people in to look at those properties, and ultimately to sell them. Real estate agents, in addition to understanding human social behavior, they need to understand where they're living and where they're working. They need to understand their neighborhoods, who's living in them, what their demographics are like, what their interests and preferences might be like, because that can help them to create a good match between a buyer and a particular property. Understanding effective sales techniques is really, really important, which is the direct connection to social psychology. If you take a social psychology course, you'll learn a lot about persuasion, attitude formation and change, and a variety of other basic theoretical principles that are then deployed in sales contexts, whether you're selling houses like a real estate agent, or if you're a salesperson in any kind of business. Now, for becoming a real estate agent, each state has somewhat different requirements. All of them, though, require a written test where you're tested on the basic rules of the game of real estate transaction and the laws that pertain to that. Real estate is often, dealing with big dollar amounts. There's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of laws that have to be abided by and processes and procedures that have to be followed in order to do real estate transactions. So real estate agents are licensed. Now, this is a bachelor's level position, meaning you can come out of with your bachelor's degree and get the additional preparation, do the additional preparation to get licensed as a real estate agent. There are programs that you can enroll in, or you can self-study to move in that direction. Public relations specialists are people whose area of expertise is communicating the organization's primary messages. So their job is to structure the messages that the organization wants sent out, to put those messages out into the community, to liaise with consumers, communicate with employees and other stakeholders that are relevant to the organization or company's business interests. Given our media environment, public relations specialists have a lot to do. Bad news about an organization can travel super fast and be very difficult to combat. So having a public relations specialist can be very helpful, especially if your business or organization works in a volatile space. Their job is to build and maintain good relationships with the public, informing the public about policies, activities, accomplishments, and so on. This is important because it creates opportunities for furthering the business interests of the organization. So keeping people loyal to the products so that they buy those products again, or loyal to the services so that they buy those services again. Public relations involves really having a good understanding of people's attitudes and opinions, as well as their values. Some public relations specialists do actually engage in research, where they are paying attention to data that's collected about public opinion. They may be able to add information to fundraising, marketing, community relations, and other aspects of what the organization does to sell its brand. Public relations specialists can be found in a lot of different contexts: business, government, universities, hospitals, schools, etc. Any organization, regardless of what type it is, that intersects with the public may find itself in need of having someone who really focuses their attention on how to send messages and communicate with the wider world outside of the organization. Psychology majors are particularly a good fit for public relations jobs because they have a background, especially if they've taken courses in social and personality psychology. They have a background in human social behavior, in persuasion, in attitudes, beliefs, and values. But they also have a background as a psych major in research, in writing, and in interpersonal skills, because those are all factors that are involved in the courses that we offer. Social media coordinators and social media strategists, these are careers that have evolved, relatively speaking, recently. Since the advent of social media and businesses jumping on board to engage social media as a place where they can sell products and services, social media coordinators have started to play a really pivotal role of basically being the voice of the organization in those social media spaces. So coordinators and strategists really focus on how do we cultivate and maintain a positive social media presence. Social media coordinators are going to be the individuals who interact with users who land on the social media pages of the organization. They are the person who basically gives voice to the brand online. They post, they monitor, they respond to comments. They also may receive complaints. And I've done this before, and occasionally leads to really good outcomes. I had a product that failed, and I got no satisfaction by trying to contact the organization directly through helplines and such. So, and this was when I was still on Twitter. I'm not anymore. I went on Twitter, found their Twitter account, described my complaint, and was immediately contacted by a social media coordinator who escalated my complaint to the right level, and it was resolved. So that's another thing that social media coordinators might end up doing. Strategists, they're also sometimes called analysts, they're going to do the research side. So the social media coordinators, that's the person or people who are representing the brand on social media. The strategists are going to take data from social media sites and analyze the amount of traffic, the traction that they're getting, how many people, what kind of people are seeing those messages, and then inform the coordinators as to how they might adjust what they're doing, like how often do they need to post, what kind of content is getting the most traction, and so on. These are individuals who help organizations describe or decide, exactly what kind of social media networks to focus on. Like, are we investing in this social media site when no one's seeing our messages? Let's get off of that site and move to this one where we get more positive interactions. So they're going to help organizations decide, where to invest their social media resources in order to reach as many users as possible. Some organizations have both of these roles, some have only one. Now, mostly in my description here, I've talked about businesses using social media coordinators and analysts. Nonprofits also do this as well. Nonprofits are routinely in the business of fundraising and strategy, and they are all of the major nonprofits are heavily present on social media because it's a major source for them of finding donors, people who will make small and sometimes large donations. So having a social media strategist to track, when does showing a particular kind of message, when does that turn around into a donation? That's really, really important. And that information can be communicated to coordinators who can then retool how they're engaging with their audience in order to increase the level of engagement with the organization as a whole. And that concludes part 1 of chapter 11.